Verse 38, now this is what you shall offer on the altar. The consecration of the altar was explained in the previous verses, especially in verses 36 and 37. Now, immediately following that description, the account moves directly into the establishment of the daily offerings to be made on that altar. The purpose of the ordination rites which were described, both for the priests and for this altar, is explained in these verses today. They are the end design to which that ordination is actually subservient, which is the worship of God and an acknowledgement to Him that all things come from Him. It would make no sense to ordain the priests and to consecrate the altar if there was not an ultimate purpose for their ordination and its consecration. Therefore, it shows that the intent for those consecrations find their fulfillment in what will now be described. No exception is given here or anywhere else concerning a relief from these offerings. Even if the land were completely deprived of food or animals, these would still be required because God, being the source of all things, was to be acknowledged for being the provider or the withholder of those things for the people. His grace could be anticipated if the offerings were made, but even if it was withheld, they would still be given in petition for mercy. To refuse to offer them as instructed would first be a violation of the covenant, and secondly, it would be a stubborn refusal to acknowledge the sovereignty of God who controls the nations and who directs the destiny of Israel. The life of the people belonged to the Lord, and therefore these sacrificial animals stood as representative of their lives being offered daily to Him. These offerings then could be summed up by Paul from his words of Romans chapter 12. Here's what he says. I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. This mandate will continue throughout the duration of the Old Covenant. Even until the time of Christ, these offerings were made. At His coming, they were made obsolete, but they continued on until the destruction of the temple in AD 70. The reestablishment of them is being planned right now in Israel. They're actually practicing right now doing these things. But this does not mean that they will be acceptable to God. Rather, they are a part of what God has said would come about in the final 7 years of the prophecy of Daniel 9, verses 24 through 27. However, these offerings were so especially important to the covenant while it was in effect that we read this from Ezra chapter 3. It says, from the first day of the 7th month, they began to offer burnt offerings to the Lord, although the foundation of the temple of the Lord had not been laid. Even before the laying of the foundation of the second temple, the daily offerings prescribed here were initiated. The same will probably be true with the reestablishment of the offerings in the coming of the next temple. As we will see, though, the offerings only picture the coming work of Christ. In Him, they are fulfilled and they are set aside.